Hey, here I am again. Hey, I got a couple of requests. It's like these emails. Hey, it's about time for a story. So I guess it's about time for a story. So here I am, back for story number 9. We're going to call this one, You Can't Polish a Turd. Or then again, maybe you can. The Birth of Photoshop. Okay, so what's that all about? Well, Photoshop is a great program for manipulating photography. There are many of them: Photoshop, Lightroom, Photoshop Elements. I don't want to make this a class, but if you're interested in photography and you're interested in digital capabilities, Photoshop is for you. So, what's the title about? You can't polish a turd. Well, that comes from my grandfather. My grandfather's been gone now for a while, but many of his sayings and limericks live on. He had a million of them. Most of them tended to revolve around his manhood. Never failed. Let me see. I got up this morning and it looked so nice out, I decided to leave it out all day. That was one of them. He and 6 others have 7 a-holes. That was another one that took me a long time to try and figure out when I was little. Wait, he and 6 others. Finally, it came to me. He had a lot of those kind. I remember he'd always like take me to the movies when I was little, and he'd say, "All right, boy, come on, hurry up, come early and pick your seat." And it was like, okay, well, I can pick what seat. No, pick your seat. And he'd always put his hands down his pants, scratch his butt. Oh, pick your seat. He had a number of those. Another one was when I was a little older, he'd say, "You know what you need, boy? You need to take a tramp in the woods." And it was like, take a tramp in the woods? I don't like to hike. What do you mean, take a tramp in the woods? You know, take a tramp in the woods. Oh, okay, I get it. So he had many of those. He was kind of the quintessential grumpy old man. That's what he was like. I remember we went to a restaurant one time, this seafood restaurant, and he would play this kind of old man. Well, the waitress was kind of attractive, and I remember as she walked by, he put his hand out and patted her on the rear end, and I was like totally like it was, oh my God. She turned around. "Oh, how dare you?" She says, big, big to do. And he says, "What? What? This old tired old man? I would never. What do you mean? Why, you backed into my hand." I mean, that's just the kind of guy that this guy was. He was a true character. Um, all the way to the very end. I remember when he was in the hospital in very bad shape, I called down to check on him and I was like, "Well, how are you? Is there anything I can do for you?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm okay, boy. But what about you? Are you getting much?" So, anyway, you can polish a turd. Where that comes from, I've cleaned it up a little bit. But when I was, I guess, maybe a senior in high school, I did this pastel drawing. And it was mediocre at best, to say the least. Mediocre would be a nice term, but it was like a flower in a vase. And anyway, I went and I bought this really beautiful wooden frame, antique vintage wooden frame, and put it in there for him and gave it to him as a gift for Christmas. And he takes one look at it and he says, "Boy," he says, "honey, you know, you can't shine SHIT." And I remember being kind of hurt, but then thinking, well, it's true. You really can't shine it. It is kind of crappy, isn't it? But anyway, if my grandfather was living today and he saw what Photoshop can do, I think he would say, "You know what, boy? You can shine SHIT." So let's look at a few examples of what Photoshop can do. First off, I used to have lots of ideas and no way of creating them. Now with Photoshop, I can create them. So let's look at a few of these things. This is one of the first things that I've done. Now I've used Photoshop a lot in my commercial work. I've collaborated with people and whatnot, but I've just finally started to see how it can work in my fine art work. I also have been very lucky enough to have a wonderful teacher, Chris Shanks, who we've become really good friends, and now we are collaborating together. And this is one of the first pieces that she and I have done together. She is a Photoshop genius. I'm getting better, but I am never near her level. So look at this piece. This is called Penguin Boy. And what's this about? Well, if you get a good view on it, the figure basically has tattoos that are all fish and um, ocean sort of oriented. And I had seen this guy and I wanted to do a kind of freak show image. And we basically did it so that the hands are almost fused onto the shoulders. And if you can get in close up, you can see that he's got a set of chopsticks and he's eating some sushi. So again, this person does not exist in real life. And therefore, the only way to make them exist would be to create them in Photoshop. So she did a wonderful job, and look at the two of them together, how well they work. It really feels very, very believable. This other piece is called Bird Girl. I tried this years ago, and I got those little wired-on birds from like, oh, I don't know, MJ Designs or Michaels or one of those, and I had them wired onto her fingers. It didn't work. It looked really, really cheesy. But look at the rough. Here's the rough version of that she and I did together. Now, I found a great model. This was one of my students. She had that really, really great kind of rasta hair. It was almost like a bird's nest itself. And I talked to her and we used a fake bird, and there's a fake bird on the shoulder. Then I wanted to do some bird tattoos. Well, I finally have decided it's time to do color. How about that? A little bit of color. So I talked to Chris. Chris and I worked it out. And look at the final version. Here's the final version. Again, it is in color. Look at that. And as you guys can see, there are actual birds. Chris shot the actual birds in flight. She loves birds and does bird watching and whatnot. So as you get in close, you can see they're in various stages of flight. And then there are some that are perched in the hair and whatnot. And we've also put on all of these bird tattoos. So you can see then the background was this beautiful sky pattern. This would not have been possible any other way besides Photoshop. So I think that my grandfather would change his mind and say, you can shine a turd. Not that these were a turd. I would like to hope that I started out with some quality images. But it used to be back in darkroom days, if you had a flat gray photograph, you could increase the contrast. You could go in the darkroom, you could put filters on. But bottom line, you couldn't really clean it up all that much. If it was flat and gray, it was going to be flat and gray. But now with Photoshop, you can. So while we're on Photoshop, I wanted to show you one other thing. I was approached by a guy named Scott Ligon. And I really like the guy. He's a very, very nice guy. He also has some wonderful ideas. I've read some of the stuff that he's written. And this is the cover for a book that my work is included in. It's called Digital Art Revolution, and it's published by Watson Guptill. And it's not out yet. It's out in March. He has a short little piece on YouTube about it under Digital Art Revolution. It's called Creating Fine Art with Photoshop. And it's a little bit of a how-to book, but it's also very much about artists and artwork and how to kind of make your art fit into Photoshop. So take a look for this. I really want to support this guy. As I say, the book is going to be coming out. I've got a piece in it in March. So everybody, I'll remind everybody as it gets a little closer, but it's a Watson Guptill book, and it's called Digital Art Revolution. And for you guys that are looking for some samples of my work, that's a good place to see it coming in March. So, as I say, I think that you can polish a turd with Photoshop. If you haven't tried it, try it. It is a wonderful program, and I think that even if you just have Photoshop Elements or iPhoto, the things that you can do now digitally are amazing. Okay, so, thanks for joining me, and come back and we'll do it again. Okay, bye-bye. See everybody.